I feel like we're best when we just dive right in, you know?
I think so.
Why
Why,
prepare?
yeah, it sounds dumb.
I have a preamble. This is the preamble right here.
Only dumb people prepare
Yeah.
and plan and do like productive,
People
like,
with goals and dreams and hopes and all that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
fuck
Those
them.
are the people who plan and they're fucking
Yeah.
stupid.
And they're like, oh, I want my life to be like this way. And I want like, oh, I have like a 5-year plan. I have like a 10-year plan. It's all in a binder. Fuck
Yeah.
you. Fuck
I never
you.
tried to make the only time I had like a 5-year plan, I feel like is when I was graduating high school, where I was like, okay, I'm going to college for 4 years, get a degree. I'm going to get my teaching certificate. I'm going to do this. And then none of that shit happened. And I was like, oh, shouldn't have fucking planned that out at all.
The time I wasted planning.
Yeah.
I could have been doing other things.
There's a lot of journaling I was doing. Okay. I'm a journaler when I plan. I draw little diagrams. I wax poetic about it. Really get prepared.
In your diary plan
In my diary,
with
5-year
your
plan.
with
Yeah.
your haikus and your limericks. I
That's,
know.
that's actually how I sketch out my 5-year plans is in haikus. I don't actually have like a written out thing. It's just fun poetic style.
That's why nothing ever gets done,
Yeah,
and
and then I
your
return
plans
to
don't
it,
help.
like 2 years later, and I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck this means. It's too fucking vague and
Yeah, you're like,
abstract.
fucking, what is this?
Why? Who am I meeting beneath the weeping willows? Like, what's going on here? I don't understand what that means.
Yeah. Am I talking about like meeting a person that will help me, or am I talking about
Right.
meeting myself and like
Yeah, am I
discovering new things
discovering
about
my?
myself?
I think I'm discovering myself. That's what it was.
I like to discover myself like a few times a week.
It's good. It's healthy, actually.
Learn a little bit extra,
Mm-hmm.
feel a
Yeah,
little bit of shame
self-reflection,
every once in a while.
self-discovery.
Welcome to the Fleeting Thoughts podcast. Here's another episode. Take it.
Episode number, whatever the fuck you want it to be.
No, it's 179.
Oh, you keep track. Okay. I
Fuck yeah, I
don't. I'm
do.
like, I don't even know what number we're on. I just know it's in the hundreds,
You
maybe
don't
almost
even know
200.
when they come out. You don't even
I don't know anything.
you don't have a clue.
I have no idea. I know
No.
we've fallen into like an every other week cadence, it seems.
Yeah, I think
Which
that
I think it works pretty well. Yeah.
It's just like that first week after is not a full week typically,
Mm-hmm.
because of time off.
Well, we're
Scheduling.
both working around work schedules and stuff. So
Yeah.
we're busy guys. Okay. We don't get
And
fucking paid
it
to
gives
do
us
this.
some time to like have something like to actually talk about typically.
I know sometimes the only thing that's tough is when it comes to recommendations. Sometimes I'm like, fuck, I watched like so many cool movies over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to pick one.
And I
Or
don't
if I finish a
remember any of
book.
them.
Yeah, that too. I'm like, wait, what did I watch? There's some good
Um,
stuff in there, but not good enough to remember.
Yeah, I just watched. I wanted to say before we get started too far, go to Fleeting Thoughts Podcast at gmail.com. Don't go there, email there.
It's not a website.
It's not a
an email
website.
address.
If you just type that in, I bet it gets you to your own email, right? Like if you type in something into the search bar, what does it do?
Probably.
Let me find out what it does.
Oh, self-discovery on the pod.
At gmail.com. What happens when you type in at? Nope, it just goes like, what are you trying to search for
Yeah,
something?
it's probably because it's trying to find a URL that does not match that.
Yeah,
but there you
so
go.
it just
Now you
goes
just
to a
learned something.
search. So anyway, go to your email program and then type in Fleeting Thoughts Podcast at gmail.com and then write.
Jesus, you okay?
Yeah,
That
I
was
just
fucking disturbing.
clearing my throat. It's early morning and deal with it. Write a little email like that says like, hey, when you cleared your throat while you were trying to promote this, I thought it was really stupid and it sounded terrible and your voice sucks. Write that or whatever.
Or whatever. Whatever feels good.
Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, whatever
The
you got
philosophy
going
we
on.
should all have in life is do what feels good unless it hurts somebody else. Then you're just going to have to take what feels good and bury it deep down inside yourself and let it fester and rot until you either learn to let it go or become a serial killer. Those are the things.
Or kill yourself.
Or kill yourself.
Yeah.
If you have the choice between
good,
raping or molesting somebody or killing yourself, kill yourself. Well, there you go.
If that's the choice. Or molest yourself.
Or if you feel like you need to murder somebody else who has not wronged you, or you believe wronged you but didn't really, then kill yourself. You know, that's
God
just the
damn.
general
Just
guidance.
straight up wisdom up in here.
Hmm.
Straight up,
Yeah,
like make the world better.
yeah.
Definitely.
Imagine if all the child molesters and rapists and serial killers. Imagine if they just all killed themselves one day.
Instead of doing those things.
Yeah, they
Ever.
just killed themselves. Like, whoa, the world would be amazing. There would be some distraught
Yeah.
families when they found out that their Christian church going father was like another up and coming BTK, but then he killed himself. So they'd be sad about it, but you know, a lot of lives are going to be saved.
Yeah, they'd probably just blame themselves a little bit, and then maybe they would kill themselves.
Yeah, but they also
Win-win.
probably maybe have a capacity to become the very thing that their father was. So maybe it's good that they killed themselves. You never know.
That's what I'm saying, is maybe it's a
Yeah.
win-win because maybe this trauma sparks in them a murderous rapist rage.
It's like, you know, it reminds me of that Louis C.K. bit where he's talking about peanut allergies in kids, and he's like, you know, if we just all look the other way and just let that
There'd be
play
no
out,
more
there wouldn't be
peanut
peanut
allergies.
allergies anymore.
Yeah, if it's genetic, that makes sense. If it's a mutation, then that doesn't work.
Why would we mutate to not love peanuts? They're
Why
so
would
delightful.
we mutate to have redheads? The world makes no sense.
That's
I know.
wisdom.
I had that in my head,
Those
ready
are the
to
big
go.
questions that we need answers to in the universe.
Why are redhead so mysterious and
Why are they so pale? You know,
Yeah.
that's the troubling thing. It's like a walking spirit with fire for hair.
Yeah.
No, that sounds poetic, doesn't it?
Yeah, you should write that down in your fucking
I am
planning journal.
There you go. Done. That was me scraping my.
Speaking of movies, which we weren't. I just saw.
It's a good one.
I saw the Batman, so we have to do the Batman review part 2 or 3 here.
Okay.
Because you recommended it last time, which
You followed that recommendation.
prompted me to see the movie, and I'm glad I did. I thought it was really good. I loved the
spoilers for the Batman, you know, just for people listening.
Yeah, we'll spoil it. We don't have problems spoiling things. Just be aware. I don't think you can spoil that movie, but I also don't really believe in spoilers other than twists.
There's like a few things you could spoil, but ultimately, I think you could talk about it pretty nonstop. I mean, everybody knows what they're getting into with Batman.
Like the Riddler ends up being unmasked at the end and is a famous actor, but that part doesn't help anything.
Yeah.
The Riddler
everybody already knows who's playing the Riddler. If you have the internet, it's like they know who's cast as the Riddler.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter.
It's more like the central political machinations, I guess, that could be spoiled.
Do you pronounce it machinations?
Machinations.
I thought it was machinations because it's like
I've heard it both ways. It's just however it flows best in the sentence.
But I guess a machine, it would be mash.
It's like niche and niche. I like saying niche more, even though I know technically it's supposed to be niche. Niche is just a weird sounding word. I don't like it. It doesn't fit well in our American dialect. Like niche sounds like it is American, you know?
Yeah, you're right. It is funky. Any CH can be tricky.
Yeah. Anyway,
back to Batman. Yeah, I liked the tone. If a movie has a unique, deliberate, and complimentary tone, that does a ton to like keep me engaged. And I liked that everything seemed a bit new and surprising. That like around every corner you're like, ooh, what's going to happen? Ooh, I didn't necessarily see that happening. It's very pretty, but in a very dark and grimy way.
Yeah.
Like it has pretty people, and it has really well done cinematography, but it's also very, very like dingy and dirty, and it's not overproduced in like a clean way, like most of the other Batmans.
Movie. They don't use. They even said that they didn't use very much CGI in it. It's all very practical.
Yeah,
even that fight scene in the hallway in the dark, where all you see is just those brief flashes from the gunfire. They actually literally did that whole scene in a dark hallway. They didn't. They originally they were gonna film it normally and then like do post production to make it a dark hallway. But I guess like the stunt coordinator is like, no, I can figure this out. Like we can choreograph this and make it legit. Yeah. And so they had to like shoot it in a bunch of little segments, because I imagine trying to choreograph fight scenes in pitch black dark like that would be really difficult. But it's cool that they were able to pull it off.
Yeah, that reminded me of the scene or two in Equilibrium where he's
Oh yeah,
in the dark room, and then the flashes are what tells him where everybody is, and then he uses that to kill everybody.
that movie is wild. Like the fighting style where they just stand and it's like all math
Mm-hmm.
angles and stuff, and you're like, what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the gun katas.
Yeah, gun
That's
kata.
probably one of the sillier parts of the movie. But it works because it's supposed to be like a modern like almost samurai movie, but because he ends up with a samurai sword at the end.
Mhm.
But they're like, how do we make guns like a karate?
Well, it made sense in that movie too because that movie's all about them living in a society without emotion. So it,
Yeah.
it would make sense that I imagine combat's a very emotionally heavy thing. There's a lot of fear, anger, etc., involved in that. So it's like if you take the emotion out and you just approach
Hmm.
combat from a completely logical,
Mathematical approach.
mathematical standpoint, like I feel like that's kind of what it would end up being like, is you figuring out the trajectory of where you need to shoot to hit, the optimal amount of targets in the least amount of time, kind of thing.
Yeah, but it also is like, how do I do that without getting hit by other
Right, because
bullets? Like, what
most
are
of the
the
time he just
odds?
stands in one spot and
Yeah,
yeah.
it's which is the silly part because bullets are so fast. Uh, like you're gonna get shot. I'm
Mhm.
sorry to tell you, you go against like six
Right,
dudes,
especially
you only
when
have so many, so many odds to
yeah,
not get shot. You're gonna get shot. It's
which is what I appreciate in the Batman is he gets shot a lot. I mean, obviously he's got the armor, so that
yeah,
stops him from dying. But it was cool, even that scene where he gets like blasted with the shotgun and he's like down and winded
yeah.
for a
He's
little
like
while.
almost out. Well, and he gets knocked out from the explosion, which I thought was
Mhm.
crazy. He's just like there.
Yeah, I was
His
like, I
face
get that
should be
he's.
real fucked up too.
I know. I was like, I get that he has armor, but his whole mouth is
Yeah.
very exposed.
Well,
Like
even
he
just
should
the
have a cut or something.
like the mask is not armored. That's
Well, it
just
does. It should. He
rubber.
gets shot in the head at one point. I'm almost positive. I think he gets shot like in the back, or maybe
He
he
gets
just
shot in
gets
the
hit in the back of
shoulder
the
a
head.
lot, like
Yeah.
in the chest a lot, which is funny. What's also interesting is he must have some pretty badass armor because
Hmm.
at the end, when they have um, sniper rifles, those are like high caliber, go through most armor type of fucking
Yeah.
guns. Like you don't want to get shot with a fucking 308 or a 7mm. Most armor is not rated for that high level of uh, bullet.
Well,
And
and
so,
also like most even like Kevlar vests and stuff, if you get hit, like
oh
the
yeah,
the it still like knocks the
concussion,
wind out of you
it'll like
and the
bruise organs. It's yeah, that's the problem
especially
with
like that hallway scene where he's just literally walking at them and then just unloading on his chest. And
yeah.
it's like a cool scene where you're watching all these, bullets ricochet off, I guess. But you're like, man, that's some powerful armor. Because you think that would like the trajectory of those things hitting him and the
It
force behind the
would,
bullets would be
yeah.
like staggering him back still.
Yeah,
But
he has to have some amount of superhero abilities to deal with all of that. But
it's also a Batman movie, so it's
yeah,
about a guy who spends all night fucking dressing up in a bat costume and fighting crime. So
yeah,
there's a
and
certain level of disbelief that you got to take in with you.
yeah, it's not like Kick Ass where like they get shot once and they're like done, and they're
Yeah,
like, oh,
that was
okay,
my favorite
this
thing
is
about
much more
Kick-Ass. You're like, this
realistic.
is what it would really be like if you tried to fight crime. You would just get your ass beat half the time. You'd be fucking bedridden all the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
it would not be something you could do every night. It's like once a month you go out. You maybe save a couple people, you get hurt, and then you spend the rest of the month resting and recovering.
yeah, or you just go out and murder folks. And you're essentially a vigilante serial killer like Dexter, but like
Mhm.
you end up getting caught and then just go to jail because you're
Yeah,
not
the
allowed to do
forensics
that.
are pretty good these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody has a camera on them in their phone. I mean, it's pretty hard to get away with stuff anymore. Somebody's always watching.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there were definitely some things that in it that were unrealistic, but for the most part, it was very, very grounded and very fun to
Mhm.
watch. And I was really impressed with Pattinson because I don't care about him at all. And
Oh, really?
it's
Yeah.
such a big role that I was like, you better do a good job. But I guess his main thing is just being quiet, which
He's a
is not
very
the hardest thing
brooding.
to
Yeah.
fucking accomplish as an actor, but it works well. Um, I
He's
like
like the ultimate
the
emo Batman, he's just very like
Yeah.
depressed and dour through the whole thing.
Yeah.
He's not like the
Especially
playboy Bruce Wayne.
at the end when he finds out like what's going on and he goes to like
Mhm.
the club without his Batman suit on and he's
His
just
hair
like
is like all
just
in his
all he
face.
looks like he's been crying all night. Um it's pretty funny. But it's getting amazing reviews, so obviously
Yeah. He is
people like it.
also, I think, the most intimidating the Batman's been as far as the movies. Like when he's in the bat suit, because he doesn't really speak that much and he
Mhm.
just has like a very kind of like visceral presence. Like he doesn't like talk to the bad guys. He just starts wailing away on them. Like,
Mhm.
so there's like this intimidating factor to him that the other Batmans I feel like haven't had, because he's like not afraid to just beat the living shit out of somebody and hospitalize them.
Yeah, yeah, that is good. That makes up for his kind of wispy frame and his wispy like face. He's kind of thin and gaunt and tall. But when he's in the bat suit, he looks fucking pretty scary.
Yeah.
And he does just beat on people like you wouldn't necessarily expect. That first scene where he is introduced, where there's different things going on in the city, and they're all afraid because the bat symbol comes out,
Mhm.
and they think he's in the shadows. But then with the big, you're like, oh, not the big group, yeah, the big group
Mhm.
of bad guys, and he comes out, and then he beats the fuck out of that first guy, and he's like,
Yeah.
I'm vengeance, and you're like, yeah, that's the right fucking move right there. That's how
Yeah.
you fucking scare some people. Um, I mean, those friends probably should have jumped in while that was going on,
Well,
and
like I was getting wailed away on, but
probably be all right. But yeah, bad guys have a hard time with group fights. But
I feel like they do a pretty good job with that in most of the fights though, because like I said, he gets hit
yeah,
a
in
lot
most of
because
them,
like
yeah,
people hit him from behind while he's like focused on
yeah.
one particular guy in front of him, like the
It's
other people come
it's
up
got a
behind him.
very almost like the rage or not raid, you know,
The
the movie.
raid, yeah.
It's got that like real close hand to hand choreography where it looks very frenetic and fast paced, and like he has to really pay attention to all the bad
Mhm.
guys. I'm sure at some point we'll get some montage of like how he trained or something, because they always
Oh
love
yeah.
to do that in subsequent movies. But yep, it was good. Definitely.
It was
Think
also probably the first time that you see Batman be more of a detective in the movies, because I was like, I think I said this
yeah,
on the podcast before, where it was like that was Batman's whole thing when it first started, was he was the world's greatest detective. But in all the movies, he
yeah,
doesn't really do a lot of detective stuff. He does a little bit in like the Nolan movies, but in the Nolan movies, he's almost more like a James Bond Batman, where he's just got all this cool military gadgets that he can afford because he's
yeah.
Bruce Wayne.
Well, he just goes into the fight instead
Yeah.
of like
Whereas this
doing
one
a
was
ton.
like it reminded me of like a 50s noir film where he's going to these crime scenes and like looking at evidence and trying to figure out, these
Yeah.
riddles and like where it's pointing him and stuff.
It
It was cool. It was like watching a like Seven, like that movie. Like that's what it reminded
kind
me of.
of,
Like if
yeah.
you took Seven and then put Batman into it, and it wasn't, as hardcore. Seven's pretty R-rated, but
Yeah. Yeah, I like the detective stuff. I think it goes away from that near the end, and it's
yeah.
mostly just like vengeance and like frantic fighting and stuff. And
Those are like the
um
complaints I've seen some people levy against it. Like from a critical standpoint, is they're like the first 2/3 of the movie is this really great, gritty kind of noir story, and then the last third becomes like a comic book movie where he's,
yeah,
foiling this big plot that was happening all along and didn't realize. But I think it works. I liked it.
yeah, I liked it. It was definitely worth going to see, and it was fun to go to the movies to go see
Yeah.
it.
I went and saw it twice. That's how much I liked it. And I enjoyed it even more the second time, I feel like. So I feel like the first time I was going in kind of apprehensive, when it's like, 'cause I'm a huge Batman fan. I always have been since I was a little kid. And so it's like whenever there's a new Batman movie, and we've been burned by some really bad Batman movies in the past, you're always kind of like, you kind of go in with your arms crossed a little bit, like, show me that this is going to be good, and prove that you guys didn't just waste everybody's time.
Yeah, right. Like
But Matt Reeves, the guy who
high
directed it, he's got a really good
expectations.
track record. So I had a feeling it would be just fine. But it ended up being probably my favorite Batman movie. I mean, I kind of want to sit down and watch the Nolan trilogy again. It's been a couple of years since I've watched all of those. And so it's like I kind of want to go back and watch those and see if I just am loving the new one so much because of like recency bias, or if it just genuinely hits better than the Nolan ones. Because the Nolan ones have always been my favorite in terms of a lot of people are like diehard Tim Burton fans, so they insist that Batman and Batman Returns are the best. But Those ones are a little too campy, I feel like, for me to like fully enjoy, although that's what they were going for. So
Yeah, I liked the Nolan ones, and I liked the Dark Knight one the
mhm.
most.
The Joker, yeah.
Yeah, the one with Joker because of the Joker mostly,
I think
and
that's why everybody loves that one so much. Heath Ledger's
I
performance
think
is fucking top notch in that movie.
it's so good that it makes the whole movie like a different thing. It
Hmm.
makes it like that particular aspect of it is so engaging and fucking interesting that without that it wouldn't be nearly as engaging, I think.
Hmm.
So that's probably my favorite Batman because of that. But this was a really good movie, a really good whether it's Batman or not, it's just a good action, dark fucking movie.
Yeah. I also appreciate that they don't regurgitate his origin story again. You know, like usually the Batman movies, when they start a new one, it's like the first scene is him and his parents in the alleyway and then they get shot. And you're like, oh my God, how many
Yeah,
times do
but
we have to watch this family get shot?
they don't show it, but they talk about it quite a
Yeah.
lot. It's
But that's
actually
like
a
kind of
major
part of the
feature
plot.
in
Yeah.
the plot, especially at the end when you find out what happened and why, and he has uh some issues with like dealing with the truth of what happened with his dad and stuff.
It was just
Um,
nice to also see him not, you don't have to like watch him go through all of the beginning, right? Like all of the developing the suit and all, like in Batman Begins, that was like a big part of that movie was he went to this place and got trained and then like all the steps that he took to become Batman,
yeah,
which was fine back then. But then I'm just glad with this one, they just kind of jump into it. They're like, oh, he's been doing this for a couple of years.
yeah.
Like you guys all know who the fuck Batman is. Like we don't need to spend a bunch of time explaining all of this. They just kind of expect you to know. Um, so I appreciated that. It gave them more time, I think, to focus on the actual plot of the movie instead of like 30 minutes of showing where he went to be trained. Well, I guess in this case, Alfred's the one who shot him out of fight, which I thought was a cool touch too.
Yeah, but they
But
didn't
you know,
explain that. It's just kind of like I
yeah, it's
taught
just
you
like a
how to
throwaway
fight,
line.
just
Be
so you
like, oh,
can.
okay,
It's like
yeah.
an explanatory line, but just so you know.
I wish that they. I wonder if there'll be. I heard that there's like a rumor that there's like a 4 hour cut of the movie that
Oh,
the director
geez.
wants to release, and I was like, I kind of hope so because I hope that means that Alfred's in the movie more because he's only in it for like 3 scenes. He's in that
Yeah,
movie for a total of like maybe 10 minutes, and so that was the only part where I was like, man, I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't get more
yeah,
of the time with Alfred and their relationship, and because he's like in the scenes he's in, I feel like is a really interesting character. There's like some emotional baggage between the two of them, but he's also kind of like his sidekick and that he's helping him solve these riddles and stuff. And
yeah. He
um,
actually does kind of all the solving of the riddles. It's kind of funny because it's kind of like Batman's supposed to be this like the perfect detective. You'd think Batman would, I mean, he does solve a lot of the stuff too, but
yeah,
the really difficult coded riddles. But I guess Batman actually does correct him in that he thinks one of the codes is like a direct code, but it's
mhm.
actually a negative code, negative space
Yeah,
where it
to
pulls the negative ones
parse
to get
out,
the word
yeah.
drive or whatever. But that kind of stuff is fun, like where they're
Hmm.
like they're like, oh no, it's not this, it's that or whatever.
Yeah, thumb drive.
Um,
That part makes me
Yep,
laugh every
thumb
time.
drive, which it adds like some levity
Yeah,
to it, but it has almost no levity to the whole thing. But there's still almost like a kind of there's a
I feel like
somewhat
Gordon is the
realistic.
character that
Yeah,
puts a
he
little
does.
levity into it because he's kind of like the most grounded of the characters. Like
Yeah,
I love the scene where they're going into the old orphanage and Batman's like, "Oh, no guns." He's like,
yeah,
"Yeah, man, that's your thing."
yeah.
He's like,
That's your
"Fuck
thing.
that! I'm taking this shotgun with me."
Yeah, and even the Catwoman lady, she has some kind of funny like kind of
Hmm.
quips toward him, kind of like calling him out on some stuff, and it has personality, which I
Yeah,
like. It's they're not just melodramatic robots who just sort of are constantly scared and concerned or whatever.
yeah.
Um, yeah, they do a good job. Um,
Well, I think all movies need a little bit of levity, especially when you're going for like a dark gothic tone like this movie does. It's like you need something to sort of break it up just a little bit so that people can feel something else other than just somber and sadness. It's like you need a moment where people can kind of chuckle at something, even if it seems like it kind of comes out of nowhere.
yeah, I
Um,
agree.
It's part of like the emotional experience when you're watching something is you need something to sort of give you some highs and lows throughout. Otherwise, I feel like if the whole thing's just kind of drab and somber, that's all you really think about later. It's like, ugh, this feels fucking sad now after watching that. Which
I
there are plenty
actually
of
I,
movies like that.
I either feel sad because they do a
Hmm.
good job of emoting that sadness, but when it's drama and it's melodrama, I don't
Hmm.
feel sad. I feel annoyed because
Yeah.
it's so unrealistic to me that everyone in the entire cast has nothing interesting to say. No one is like saying, "Hey, isn't this fucking crazy?" Or "You
Right.
just did something stupid," or "I can't believe I just did something stupid." Like they all just are so enamored with the scariness that they aren't humans anymore. It weirds me out when the writing is so one dimensional. I feel like that pulls me out of the whole story.
Hmm.
When there's no personality to the characters and they all have the same personality or whatever. Um,
That's
I
just
don't
like real
like that.
life, man. Most of us are just copies of each other.
You think so? I don't think so. I think that's like how we tell people apart is like everyone has this weird quirky thing going
Mm.
on, and most people are trying to be like engaging in some way. Like when they talk, they try to like say something somebody's going to give a fuck about. Um,
But fail most of the time.
most of the time, everybody's
Yeah.
nobody's that interesting, but it's a lot of people are trying to be interesting, and that's kind of what's funny about people is they mostly suck.
I agree. Yeah.
At accomplishing things. Or they're just complaining all the time. But that can be funny, you know. So
Complaining all the time.
let's move on.
All right, there
Uh
we go. Go watch the Batman if you haven't already.
yeah, I
Well, we
think
don't
you
want to spoil
probably have.
anything, so there we go.
Yeah, I don't think you can spoil it. It's an experience. Like it's
Yeah.
like spoiling like a roller coaster ride. You can't spoil it. If I say,
Yeah.
"Oh, there's this big dip," and you go, "Ugh," that doesn't spoil it. That just makes it's an experience. You have to experience it.
Yeah. Well, it's also people are like, yeah, that's what roller coasters do. So thank you for thanks
Yeah,
for explaining
exactly.
that to me. Like,
Well, I guess it's different in stories, but like,
yeah.
um, I just
But I
think,
mean, what I mean is like a lot of like that movie, it's like it's a Batman movie. Like if you know who
yeah,
Batman is, you kind of like just have a certain expectation. But obviously there's still some curveballs in there, but mostly it's about a guy who dresses up in a bad suit and beats the fuck out of people. Criminals, more precisely.
he tries to find people to beat up, and he finds them.
Exactly.
And there's lots of bad guys in the Gotham
And
land.
there's some gadgets and some
Heretics.
grappling.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like I said, let's move on,
Okay.
which we didn't do.
Wait. No, I'm just kidding.
I watched another movie it was decent. It wasn't awesome. It's the one with Ryan Reynolds and the kid, Adam
Oh, the Adam
Project.
Project.
Um, it's a time travel movie, and it has some pretty loose scientific aspects to it related to time travel and quantum physics and stuff. But mostly it's just like a fun, like almost like one of those old like 90s like kids movies where
This is what
it's
people were comparing it to, like the Goonie, like from the
yeah,
80s,
it's
like
got
old
got
Spielberg movies like E.T. and the
everything's
Goonies and Back to the Future.
kind of up here as far as like most people aren't really dying in it.
Hmm.
There's a lot of like knocking people down. There's no it's definitely like geared toward young adolescent boys and fathers. Like it's about uh like
Being a dad
growing
to
up
yourself
and
because your
then
dad's absent. So you have to rely on
well
yourself from the future to be your dad.
yeah, because his dad is dead, and so he has a lot of hangups with that. And then
Hmm.
so it's but it has some really good feel good moments in it and relationship stuff, and he learns to like appreciate his mom a lot more through meeting his older self. It's interesting. It's got a lot of good messages. I think it's great for like a dad to watch with his son, or even just a family. Like it's like a family movie. Probably going to make get a ton of views because of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's pretty popular. I see people talking about it a lot online and stuff. Because I think a lot of people were surprised that it was as good as it was. Because as much as I like Ryan Reynolds, his movies are like totally hit or miss. Like either they're really good or you're just like,
Mhm.
like he did
Yeah.
that movie with The Rock and is it Gal Gadot? I think she plays Wonder Woman. Anyway, they did that movie Red Notice for Netflix like
Yep.
last year, and I remember Vanessa watching. I'm like, that was the most mediocre fucking movie that I've ever seen.
It's very
Like it
mediocre.
was super generic, and so I feel like that's Ryan Reynolds. He's either making really
Yeah.
generic movies that aren't really bad, they're just kind of forgettable, and
Yeah.
then he makes like excellent movies. And it
Yep.
sounds like people were kind of surprised that this one turned out to be an excellent one. Because I when I saw the trailer for the Adam Project, I was like, nope,
Yeah.
that just looks like a
I,
fucking
I
wasted
would
afternoon right there.
I would not say excellent, and you probably wouldn't like it that much necessarily. I didn't like go, oh my God, when I watched it. It wasn't like that. It was just kind of like, it was on, and I was probably doing other things partway through and stopped halfway through and then watched the rest later. It wasn't like something that blew my mind, but I thought it was well done, and I liked that it had more of a family storyline to it than a lot of movies. A lot of movies don't don't talk about like parent kid relationships, and
Mhm.
this one did it in a way that I think is beneficial to the world, I suppose.
The whole
So
world.
yeah, I think so. Unless you're in another country and you don't get our cultural references, then it won't make sense. um Anything else new in the last week or two? I know we've been playing Elden Ring a lot, so we could always talk about that. They did nerf that lovely sword that you'd
Oh,
been
so yeah,
going ape
so
shit
I was
about.
so I was gonna talk about. So I was up till 3 o'clock this morning finishing the game, got the platinum
Hmm.
trophy. I fucking did everything.
Jesus
Um,
Christ.
but yeah, like they with the new update, they nerfed the Sword of Night and Flames,
Yep.
and they nerfed the Mimic Ashes. But
Yep.
because that ash, when you summon it, it creates a duplicate of you.
Yeah.
And so what they did is, I guess they did like a 50% damage reduction on the Mimic.
That's a
So
lot.
he's just not as effective at fighting, which I will admit, like he probably needed a little bit of a nerf, or they could have just left it in. I
Well, you
was
can
so
only use it in
frustrated.
PvE anyway. So why not leave it in?
Yeah.
It's about killing those bosses. Like,
Well, and I feel like it was kind of because I didn't use him until later in the game. I was actually using a different Ash that I'd gotten to plus 10, and then everybody was like, "Oh man, the Mimic one's like the fucking best. If you get it to plus 10, I think it's lethal." And I was like, "Okay, I'll upgrade it. I'll probably need it for like the end game bosses, I'm guessing." And so I used him on a few and like he would trivialize most of the bosses because it was essentially like having two of you, and he
mhm,
had a sort of Night and Flames also. So he was
mhm.
just using those same crazy fire and magic beams, and literally the boss's health would just go and like I was finishing some boss fights in like 5-10 seconds because
Yeah.
we would just both run in and annihilate the boss. So I was
Well,
like,
and
oh
the
fuck.
boss doesn't get a buff.
Mm-mm.
Boss doesn't
No,
get
they
one of
don't with
those,
the
like
Mimic.
with PvP or not PvP, but with co-op.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a person in there with you, the boss gets more health or does more
Yeah,
damage or
yeah, I
whatever it
think
is. I
he
think it's
gets more
mostly just get
health.
more
Yeah.
health. But when you have one of those summons, it doesn't do that because it's just PvE,
Mm-hmm.
and so you get this major benefit of using it.
Yeah, but I feel like they should have left it the way it was, or maybe not done a 50% reduction, but maybe like a 15 or
Yeah.
20% where he's not like quite as lethal
It
because
should just be like when every time you level it up, it gets like that percent closer to you.
mhm.
So by the end, it's doing like 90% of what you do. It doesn't
Yeah.
ever do 100%,
No,
but
that's a great idea because I feel
because
like it
it
was kind of
costs you
like
to do that.
it was almost like a little bit of an easy mode. You know how people always want easy modes for these
Yeah.
games. There's a lot of people who want to play them and experience the world, but they're just not skilled enough as gamers to actually play the game because some of them are fucking really hard. So I was like, see, this is the kind of stuff that kind of makes the game easier for people who want to experience. It's like, oh, here's a tough boss. Well, I have this cool thing that can help me get through the boss fight. And like and I agree, like you said, you can't use it in PvP. I understand that they do a lot of balancing stuff because the PvP gets fucking broken when people figure certain
Hmm.
builds and equipment out. But even the sort of Night and Flames, the charge up time for the magic blast is so long. Like the few times I did PvP, if I tried, I never ever hit
Yeah.
anybody with it
You
because they
you
know how
would.
to dodge
Yeah.
out of the way of it. It's very easy attack to avoid. And so anyway, but my whole character build was based around that sword. Once I got it, took it to plus 10. I'm like, this sword's fucking excellent. So I basically became an intelligence faith build because that sword scales off those two stats.
Hmm.
Um, and with that patch, I was at the end game. I think I had like maybe 4 or 5 like bosses left, and then they they did
Nerfed
that
it.
patch and they nerfed the sword, and I was using the mimic to help me fight some of the bosses. So I was like, cool, they literally just nerfed every fucking thing that I was using in this game. I
Yeah.
literally had to respec my character and then find another weapon and upgrade it because
Oh, really?
I
It was
couldn't
that
finish some of
different.
the they reduced the damage by 33% on the magic blast, and then they
Mhm.
reduced the fire wave attack by like 20%, which
Wow.
is a substantial,
Yeah, that's
especially.
kind of a bummer, but it is one of those swords where it's like you find it, you get easy mode.
Mhm,
I don't like that. I'm not a huge
yeah.
fan of that in the game. I think that it should be more um like progressive. Like you should have to work your way up to that level and not
Well,
just
the
be able
thing
to
is,
have it
is
right away.
is the way the game's designed because the sword's not
You can just
found
go
until
find it.
later in the game. But since the game's open world and there's no
Yeah, you can just go
barriers
get it.
really, you
Yeah.
people figured out you could just jet right over there and go get it right in the
Yeah.
beginning.
I think
But
they
if
might
you
need to
found it
work on that
naturally,
aspect. Maybe make a few more little walls for people
mhm,
to, or little gates for people to get those kind of
or just
weapons.
I feel like just leave it at like that's how you design the game. I mean,
Yeah,
when I went and
that's
got the
true.
sword, it was still like an hour-long process of me following a guide to figure out how to get there and then get the
Yeah,
materials to get it upgraded. I mean, there was still work I had to put in to
sure.
get it set up. So it's not like I could just zip over and 5 minutes later I'm destroying the game. It was like, no, I had to fucking brave some treacherous areas to fucking get this thing. Um, but if you found that sword through natural progression, right? Because it's in the Caria Manor, and that's like the fourth main area you go to. Like you fight
Yeah,
Margit, and
it
then you
makes
go
more
through
sense. Yeah.
Stormvale, then you go to the Academy. I mean, so there's like if you got it during that progression period, it would be less effective. Like it's still an effective sword, but also I was able to go to end game areas right away to get the smithing materials to get it to +10 like super early on, which made it
Yeah.
fucking lethal. So it's like it's in their design, right? Like
Yeah.
they allowed you to go anywhere that you want to go. And so here you go. And like now you can beef this shit up. They should have known that people were going to find ways to, get to things earlier. Anyway, so I will say, and I'll almost as a warning to you, the last like gamut of bosses, probably the last 3 or 4 main bosses, the difficulty spike is tremendous. Like
Mhm.
it went from like me breezing through most bosses in 1 to 2 tries. And I don't know if part of it's probably the nerf too, because they nerfed everything that I was fucking using. Um, but some of the end game bosses are fucking insane. Like the hardest From Software bosses I've ever fought before. And I've played literally all of their games. Like I've never fought bosses that it took me this many tries. Like some of
Mhm.
them were just fucking insane. Like some of them I genuinely like I would fight a few times and I'm like sitting there like I don't even know how to fight this thing. Like
Mhm.
I'm like trying different tactics and I'm just getting the fucking floor wiped with me.
Mhm.
Um but obviously I figured it out. But the final boss in particular, I started fighting him. I got to the end and I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna finish it, get this platinum tonight. Like my goal was to just finish it up this weekend sometime. And it was like 10 o'clock, and I'm like, I could probably fight the last boss and just wrap this up. I fought him for like 2.5 hours, and I could not beat him. And that was with me. It was before I did the Sword of Night and Fire respec. So I was still
Mhm.
using that because at the time I was like, it's still getting me by. I don't want to have to respec my character, find another weapon, invest all these materials, and I'm at the end game. I'd rather just finish the game and be done. Um, but the final boss, I just literally I just could not do enough damage with the sword, and
Mhm.
I was trying it with the mimic, which was nerfed, so he wasn't that helpful. And then I was trying it with summoning other people. I was summoning like 1 to 2 people, and we were just constantly getting wiped.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was like, fuck it. I went to bed at like 12:30, and I laid in bed for an hour, and I couldn't let it go. Like
Yeah.
I literally couldn't sleep. I was just sitting in bed, like I could try this, I could do that, I could try this
Mhm.
thing. Like it was like it's been this forever since I've played a game where it's so in my head and like affecting my ego where I'm just
Mhm.
like I fucking have to. So I literally got up at 1:30 this morning, and then I finally finished it like 2:51.
Mhm.
It was I finally fucking took him down. But the only way I could do it is I was like, fuck it. I was like, I'm just gonna have to get up. I'm gonna have to go to that lady, respec my character. I
Mhm.
was like researching like what are alternative weapons that are actually good that aren't like that haven't been nerfed. And so I ended up using the Dark Moon Greatsword, which it scales off of intelligence and strength. On dexterity a little bit. So then I have respect my character, and I like dumped like 60 5 points into intelligence and then like 50 points into strength, and then I put the rest between stamina, health, and focus. And so, and then I was able to use that because there's the special skill on that sword is when you two-hand it in L2, it turns the sword into the Moonlight Greatsword, which is like a staple of all of the From games, basically, except for Bloodborne.
It's in Bloodborne too.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
And so when you activate that, then it enhances the magic damage with each hit, and also when you heavy attack, it shoots a magic beam out of it, not like the one from the Knight of Flames. It's just like a wave of magic that shoots out of it. I mean, it doesn't cost any magic points. You just use mana to activate the Moonlight Sword. So I was able to kind of hang back, and it hits the moon waves hit just like a heavy hit. So I was able to stagger the final boss a couple times, which helped.
Oh wow.
So that sword's fucking fantastic if you're looking for just a really amazing great sword, because it has the magic and physical damage. And
strength.
It has a much more effective. I just had to get really good at dodging because the shield's fucking useless against the final boss. He does all holy damage.
Oh
and
yeah.
And the problem is the final boss is essentially 2 bosses back to back with no break in the middle. You fight one guy, and then as soon as you take him down, he changes into this big fucking ridiculous thing. And so you don't have a way to replenish any flask. So basically, you have to essentially finish the first fight using almost none of your supplies, so that you have everything for the actual like second fight. Because the second fight, he's just shooting lightning at you and fucking lasers, and then he swims across this giant room. And you have to fucking sprint over to him again, avoiding all of these attacks. And then you get maybe a few hits in, and then he fucking swims off to the other side. And like half of his spells home in on. It's the most ridiculous fight.
What level were you at?
183, 185, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I've never spent that much time fighting a boss before in any of these games. Usually it's like, the most I've ever died is like maybe 5 or 6 times, and then I figure it out. But I probably fought him like 30, 40 times. Like,
wow.
I was using everything at my fucking disposal. I'm like, what is there anything I can craft, like an item crafting that will fucking help me? Because the first part of the fight, I guess he's susceptible to Scarlet Rot. So they're like, if you have a way to put Scarlet Rot on him, it helps a lot. But the second phase, like the final boss, he has no weaknesses, and he also isn't strong against anything. So it's like it's not like he's immune to, he's immune to the holy damage, but he's not immune to like fire or magic or anything, but he's also not weak to any of it. So you can't hit him with bleeding, which is like a big tactic. A lot of people use, almost everybody uses katanas now. Because once you inflict bleed on stuff, it just devours bosses. Anyway, so that's my very long nerdy ass diatribe about my end game experience. But the fact that if that patch came out like a couple days later, I probably would have been fine. Like I wouldn't have had to literally change my whole character build. And then luckily I had enough materials through playing through the game to get the Dark Moon Greatsword to +10 right away. Because I was like, fuck, man, like I invested all these crafting materials into the Knight of Flames sword, and it's a fucking waste. The sword is useless at the end game now. It's still effective early, like probably early to mid game. But once you hit the end game, the bosses have so much health and they hit so hard, it's like fucking pointless unless you're teamed up with somebody else and they're aggroing him for you and you can keep magic blasting him. It's still kind of effective, but yeah, I would totally, like, people who are listening and play Elden Ring, if you're a Knight in Flames person, just be prepared to have that sword be completely useless at the end game, because the end game bosses are fucking, that does such little damage to them, and it costs a lot of mana to use that sword blast and stuff too. So it's like you're investing all this mana into blasting them and the charge up time. And yeah, anyway, so that sword fucking sucks now, basically, is what I'm saying. And at least at the end game, I feel like people will still find it really helpful early on in the game. It'll probably still wipe the floor with early bosses that don't have a ton of health and stuff. But yeah, you have to completely change tasks.
Yeah, I don't look at the game in any way the same way you do. You look at it like, how do I beat this game? I don't even think about it. I don't even want to beat the game. I have no desire to find out even what those end bosses are like right now. I want to spend time playing around, and I don't. I want to play with different weapons. I want to learn different ways of playing. I like I have no desire to use, I actually had little desire to use that weapon until you were using it so much. And then I started investing in intelligence, and now I have to respec my character or start a new one. But you can still do stuff with intelligence and
Yeah,
faith.
the
Anyway,
respec is easy to do. You just have to finish the academy level and beat
yeah,
the
I'm in
boss
there
there,
right
and she's
now.
the one that does respecs. And then
Yeah,
you just have to have the larval tiers, which I had like
yeah.
9 of them at the end of the
I have a
game.
couple already.
Yeah,
Um,
so and that's all it costs. You just have to give her one of those tiers, and then it literally you just go to a menu, and it you just once you spend all your points back up to what level you're at, then it lets you close out of it basically.
mhm.
So the respec's super easy to do, and I think it's cool. If they hadn't had the option to respec, I would have been fucked. Like I would have had to just go grind runes to build up to add. I would have probably had to get up to like level 250 or something to put points into other stats in order
Yeah,
to
do
fix
something
my
else.
character. And that's what frustrates me about. I get that you want to balance the game, right? Because everybody always finds exploits, especially in games like this. So the developers like, oh fuck, we got to go, nerf this or change this because it's like breaking the game.
Hmm.
But the problem is in this game is that I was building my character for that weapon. That's kind of how these games are. It's like you find a weapon you really enjoy that in what stats it scales off of, and you kind of build your character around that weapon. And so it essentially made my fucking character build useless because the thing I was building my character around was nerfed so severely.
Yeah,
And so had I not been able to respec, I would have had to probably grind for like 5 hours on fucking runes just so I could put points into in strength and intelligence to get it up to use the Dark Moon Greatsword. So I'm
yeah.
thankful that they have the respec option, which I feel like they added because the game's so massive. It's a
Well, they
game
had
that
it
I
in
will.
DS3. They had
Oh,
it
did
in
they?
they had it in other games. Yeah, it's not
Yeah, and
the only game that had
Bloodborne
it.
and Dark Souls 3 were the two that I didn't play. That I played through them one time and that was
Yeah,
it. But by then I was kind of burnt out on the whole Souls formula, and I was like,
yeah,
Bloodborne was really cool though. I like that.
yeah.
But Dark Souls 3, as much as I liked it, I was like, I'm just kind of done with
Mm.
these games right now. And then when Demon Souls came out on PS5, it just fucking drew me right back in because that was like my nostalgia game where I had spent so much time playing that on the PS3 and I fucking loved it. And this game is different enough where they've really shaken up the formula so much that I'm like really invested in the game. Um, but I like unlike you, I play games with like a purpose because I have a whole backlog of games that I want. I still have
Yeah,
Horizon to go back to.
I
I've
don't
got
have that at
Ghostwire
all.
coming out Friday, so it's like when I play, I usually play with a purpose. Like my goal is to enjoy the game, but I'm also finishing it so that I can kind of move on to the next thing. Whereas I know you don't play nowhere near that many. It's like this will be the game you're probably playing all year. Maybe a couple others that tickle your fancy, but it's a game that I'm not gonna like take off my hard drive because I was like, I still want to leave it on there because I still like when you and Joey are on, it's like I'd still like to hop in and like
Mm,
fight bosses with you guys and stuff. And
sure.
there's even though I got the platinum, there's so much of that world that I haven't seen.
Hmm.
Like, because you just have to fight all the main bosses and a bunch of optional bosses, and then you have to find all the legendary weapons, talismans, and incantations. That's all you have to do to get the trophies. But there's just shit tons of stuff. There's like tons of spells I haven't found. There's dungeons
Hmm.
that I haven't gone through. Like I found the dungeon, but I was like, I'll come back to it later.
Hmm.
So there's like if I feel like hopping back in, there's still a lot of new stuff for me to go check out. There's a ton of optional bosses that
Hmm.
I just rode by out in the open world because I was like at the end and I was like, I just want to finish the game right now.
Hmm.
So there's even bosses that I can go back and fight and stuff. So it's
Yeah.
there's a lot to still do in the game. So it's like definitely something that I'll probably keep dipping my toes back into throughout the year. Or like I said, if you guys are on and hit me up,
Hmm.
I'll probably switch over and join in with you guys and help do stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm kind of excited to finally move on because I've been wanting to get back to Horizon. I started it, but then I was so absorbed in Elden Ring that I can't. I was like, I'm just gonna have to play only this until I'm
Yeah.
done with it. Did you see though in the update, which is really helpful, is it tells you on the map where NPCs are now, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
When you're like, fuck, I don't
Including
remember where this person
merchants.
is. Mhm.
Yeah. That's
That was
that's
a
a
wonderful
I
thing.
used to try to mark them with
Mhm.
my own personal marker, and that was helpful, but it was tedious. And I'm glad they did that. I hope they don't add too much because it's already starting to look a little cluttered on the map there. And I kind of like that it's a little simplified and it's a little more kind of I don't know, D&D style where you have to put your own markers on. But having the markers for the merchants is super helpful
Yeah, I
because
don't think they should add anything else. I agree. I think the
yeah,
merchants
I
are
want it to
helpful
be limited.
because when you're like, if you start doing a quest for one of the NPCs, but then you get sidetracked and you're doing other stuff, and you're like, oh fuck, I don't even remember where that guy is or
Yeah,
what he wanted
that's
me to
tough.
do because there's not like
Yeah,
a quest log in the game.
no.
So like some of the quests that I did, I had to like look at guides on my phone because I was like, wait, so I
uh,
got to go here and do this.
Yeah.
There was like one lady for one of the optional bosses for a trophy. It's that deathbed companion lady who after she like disappears from the hold, and then you have to go to a specific place at a specific time in the game to find her. Then
Hmm.
you got to like kill her 5 guardians and then talk to her. And if you pick the wrong dialogue option when you're talking to her, it locks you out of that boss fight. You make
Mm.
one like wrong. So I literally had to follow a guide to make sure that I didn't fuck it up. So
For
that I
what
could,
what boss?
it's for the Lich Dragon something.
Oh,
It's like an
okay.
optional boss.
Oh, okay.
And
Just
um
weird dialogue
yeah, it's
related
just like
stuff.
it's her side quest. But if you select, because like the very first dialogue option you have with her when you meet her at the Deep Root Grove or whatever, if you select the first option, then it just ends the quest, and then you don't get to fight that boss at all
Yeah.
until you go new game plus or start a new game. So
Yeah.
it's like that kind of stuff where I was like, I don't want to miss out on that. I don't want to have to do a whole second playthrough just for this one fucking thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, some of those quests I had to like pay attention to and follow them through with a guide to make sure that I didn't fuck it up.
Yeah.
But say I think that was one of the only ones that was like that bad where it would completely lock you out of something. But a lot of times it's like you meet the person, you talk to them, they tell you something vague, and then you're like, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Like I don't know what do you want me from me? Like, and some of them don't have anything for you to do. You just seems like you should do something for them because most NPCs you do. But yeah, there's a bunch of side quests for characters that I haven't even done because I didn't need to at the time. So
Yeah, I'm not good at following the side quests or the NPC quests just because I don't pay attention to any of the dialogue, and I find it to be so cryptic and kind of
mhm.
obnoxious that I'm like, nah, fuck you. I'm not
I
here
even
for you.
skipped
I'm
the
here for myself. I don't
I
care
skipped the
about your
cutscenes and
NPCs.
everything. I'm like, I don't even know. I'm going here to become the Elden Lord. That's the plot. Okay, got it. And then
Yeah,
like
and
that's
that just
it. Like I
means
don't
go through
care.
the game. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's how every Souls game is. I'm like, this is the vaguest shit ever. None of these
Hmm.
people cannot speak in riddles. I don't know what's going on. All I know is I gotta get to that fucking guy and kill him. So that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah,
I definitely do not play those games for the lore. Like when they were like, "Oh, George R. R.
I don't either.
Martin's writing the lore," blah blah blah. I'm like, so it's gonna have a story that makes sense because none of
It
the other games
doesn't.
do, and
It
it
doesn't
doesn't.
have a
Yeah,
story to me. I don't. I think the George R. R. Martin thing
a selling
is
point
like
that,
this percent
yeah,
of any of it. I think it's
hmm
almost none of it because I think he wrote some
he
stuff
probably did a,
down
yeah,
and then they said, okay, we're going to use some of that stuff. And then they
yep.
wrote their own story because they do their own thing. They're not interested in some Western fucking obvious Game of Thrones esque fucking fantasy. They're
I
interested
wonder
in,
though, because his name is big, with Game of Thrones, obviously. I wonder how many people bought the game because they're like, "Oh shit, George R. R. Martin wrote this,"
I think
because
that was
there's
all
a
of
ton of
most of why he
people.
did that. It
Yeah,
was mostly a marketing ploy
hmm
to make the game more accessible, and the game is more accessible. It's
yeah.
just barely more accessible as far as lore goes.
It's
It's just
literally
not much better.
the easiest Souls game until like the last
Yeah.
3 or 4
But I
bosses,
think
and
they
then
did
it
that on
becomes a
purpose
totally different
because
game.
they're like, this game is you got the spirit summons, you got the fucking
Hmm
running away from everything if you want for the most part, a lot of the bosses. And so it's like, how do we make this an epic, hard ass Dark Souls type game? And
Yeah,
they make the end bosses really tough
I'll be
so that
curious to
you
see how
can't
many
just
people.
run through it.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking, I was like, do I need to go level up more? And I'm like, looking at most people are like, yeah, I finished the game like level 100. I'm like, well, I'm fucking 180. That's obviously not the problem.
I
The
wonder
problem
if
is my skill.
the end boss actually scales to you.
I don't think so. It's just you have to be really good at dodging his attack. He's just a
Yeah.
boss
You
that
just
you
have to
have to
learn him.
fucking learn the pattern. Like
That's
you
good
just
though, because it's better than a boss that's just so hard because he has endless stamina, can do 80 million things.
well, he
And
does all that too. He's
yeah,
got so much
but
health. Like
yeah,
you can't like it's actually harder to fight him
with
bringing other
other
players
people.
in
Yeah.
because it gives him so much more health. And nobody that I was playing with last night, the
Could beat
dozens of
him.
people I played with, could stay alive through the whole, like I was the
Hmm.
last man standing every time. And I'm just like, fuck me. So that was when I realized I was like, I just have to do this by myself. So what
Yeah.
I
Isn't that
did
crazy? Yeah.
is I fought the first part of the fight by my just completely solo.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I dropped him and it went to the
You go to the
second
spirit
boss,
summon.
then I brought my mimic out because if you bring
Yeah.
the mimic out too early, he would sometimes die in the first phase and then you'd have nothing to help him in
Yeah.
the second.
Yeah. Because you can't call
And
it again.
the second phase is when you really need the help and it's just because, and this is the bullshit thing about that fight is that the arena is so large that he can just go from one side of it to the other in seconds. And
Yeah.
but then you have to sprint all the way over to him. And it's a fucking big room. So it's like part of the difficulty is just how big the space is. If it was a smaller room and you were able to stay closer to him for longer stretches of time,
Yeah, wouldn't take as long.
there's like a little bit of RNG involved because there's like sometimes I would fight him, he would kind of stay in one place for a longer period of time, and then other times he was constantly moving, and I'm like, I can't even damage him because by the time I get to him, he just runs away again.
Yeah.
And so there's like a little bit of fucking luck involved with it too. It's like skill and then a little bit of luck and just knowing when to summon like your ash spirit to help you and making sure that you're not using too many supplies in the beginning. It's there's a lot. It's been a while since I fought a boss, right? Just could not let it. I was like fucking obsessed with it last night, and I was pissed because it's been a long time since I let a game kind of beat me. I think Sekiro was the last time where I was like, I can't do this game. Like I just don't have the skill level that they need from me. Yeah.
Well, good job.
Yeah, it was fucking fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to look on retrospect. I was so frustrated last night, but it was like I was getting to the point where I wasn't even like mad. It was like I would sometimes start a run against the boss, and within 10 seconds, I'm like, nope, I might as well just die because I've already been hit like twice, and it's
you need the
wasted.
health. Yeah.
Yep.
It's like where you have to do almost a perfect run to kill it, and I think that's cool. I think that's the kind of Dark Souls milieu is that you don't get to just beat it because you want to. You have to earn it. You have to learn.
Well, and they strip out,
it's going to frustrate
ability.
you.
Yeah, I think the meanest trick is that they strip away your ability to bleed him or put poison on him. Like the very final boss is not weak to any of that.
There should be some. Almost everything has one weakness, like something you can do. Can you poison it?
It's just raw damage. Like, because I was even looking at a guide, I was like, is there a tactic I'm just missing? And people are like, for the first part of the fight, Scarlet Rot is the way to go if you're having a hard time. But then the second phase, they're like, he doesn't have a weakness, like, but he's not strong against anything. He just is. And so they're like, it's just about raw damage output and being able to avoid his attacks.
So I wonder if like strength, like if you're just a strength build, you're doing the most amount of single hit damage.
Yeah,
that's probably one of the best ways to do it.
But he gets so much more health with other players that it's ridiculous. Like if you go in with a full crew of 3, his hit points are astronomical. It's like not even worth
doing
it.
Tiny little ticks.
Yeah, no, literally it was like chip damage. But then when I was playing by myself, I would probably take like maybe a 1/12 of his health or something with every hit.
So you can at least
it wasn't
see
like quite as bad, but
I don't know. I think I'm planning on doing like what I wanted to do first, which was like maybe I'll do strength faith or something like that, but I'll play different characters and just play through the game. I enjoy the running around and finding stuff.
That was my favorite part of the game.
I
kind of hit that point where I was like, oh shit, I'm at the end game. And then I'm like, I kind of just want to finish it now. I'm so close. I'd rather just finish the story, because then, after you beat the final boss, it'll has a little thing saying, oh, do you want to go into New Game Plus? And you can say, or do you want to
fuck around? Yeah.
And then you just have the whole world open to you.
Now you can fuck around. You could level up however you want. You could, go find stuff and not have any major goals in mind. But
yeah, that's what I mean. I'm definitely going to leave it on my hard drive, and it'll be something I'll probably bounce back like in and out of just to check some stuff out here and there. Because like I said, there's still plenty for me to find.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was playing with you and Joey, it's like you guys would have things on the map unlocked that I hadn't even been to, and I thought I had fucking scoured that whole area. So it's like it's kind of cool that there's just so many things like that in the game. Where
there's stuff in even just the very beginning area that I haven't found. So, it's enjoyable. I'm glad that they do balance patches. I think that it annoys. It's gonna fuck everything up for everybody, but I think that it's more important for them to take the game and make it balanced over the course of the next couple of years for everybody than just to leave it alone. Unless you don't play PvP. The PvP is the only reason to balance it. Otherwise,
I think that's the only reason.
Just let it go. But a lot of people were using that sword in PvP, and they were wrecking people because they would like gank people, and then the person wasn't paying attention and they'd get hit by it. But
there's a big problem I guess in PvP right now with death blight builds, where there's like a shotel that you can use with along with like an incantation, and they were like it just gives people death blight like as soon as they're in the vicinity of that character, and so people are just
it's just not fair. And
So it's
I
like, well,
think,
that obviously needs to be nerfed
yeah,
because that's fucked.
yeah, it's people figure out what to use in PvP to give them like this like complete surprise on people that they just can't deal with. Even just the horror frost stomp, they nerfed that a little bit because the people were just fucking spamming and it takes almost no FP to use,
Yeah,
and it
people were
fucks shit
using it
up.
to speed run the game. So now, like the speed runners are saying that they have to literally find a whole new strategy to speed run
Good.
because
I think
Hoarfrost
that's
Stomp was
good.
like the
The
key.
game's only been out like 2 or 3 weeks, and people are like, we've already exploited everything. So I'm glad that From Software goes in and they fuck with it and they change things, and
Yeah,
it makes people really, because the point of the game is not to find one fucking thing and then just beat the game. I mean, that is an option. But
yeah,
to me, they're not making the game to do that. They're making the game to be like a world, and the
yeah. They want
world
you to explore and do all this
is a
stuff.
series of challenges. And if you just find something that takes away the challenge, then they haven't done their job correctly as developers, because it's really about like puzzle solving in the game. It's like, how do you beat this particular bad guy? And they throw new bad guys at you all the time, and it creates a kind of skill and creativity that I really enjoy. Um, and that's why I still only use like a +3 Claymore, because I'm still just learning the game. I don't want to waste my materials on certain things. And I just
Well,
haven't
like I
really
said,
decided what to
that's
do.
the only thing that frustrated me really about them. It's not that they nerfed the sword; it's that I invested all these components into it, and I
Yeah.
built my character around the sword. So it's
Yeah.
like when they nerfed it, I'm like, well, now it's not like that it's useless. Well, it's actually useless in the end game, but um it's just like everything that I'd worked towards building it up was a waste of time essentially. And so that's what kind of made me mad. I
Yeah.
was like, I invested all this stuff to make my mimic a +10, my sword a +10,
Yeah.
and like the the items that you need to make something go from +9 to +10 are super limited in the game.
Yeah.
There's only like 2 or 3 of them
Yeah.
total, maybe a little bit more, but
Yeah.
so it's like when you do that, it like completely like sort of ruins your playthrough a little bit. But I mean, at the same time, it's like I
Yeah.
understand why they nerfed it because it was breaking the game. But
Yeah.
um,
I think the problem with that sword wasn't even the damage. It was that it would knock down things immediately. It
mhm,
would do like 2 or 3 strong attacks for you. And because it knocks stuff down, that's what does the staggering ability of anything is what allows you to kind of like win.
mhm,
And so if they made it so that it didn't stagger, it didn't do that, like, it would knock down bosses like immediately if they were able
mhm,
to be knocked down. If it just didn't knock them down and they could just keep going at you, it would have changed that weapon.
yeah,
But because it knocks them down, it it just fucks, like, even the flame version of that sword, not that big of a deal. It, like, things can get out of the way, you can see it
mhm,
coming. It has this big wide spread, it does a ton of damage if you're close to it. That part worked pretty well because it didn't knock everything over, but the other one knocked everything over. So if you got hit once, you got hit like 3 times and you got knocked over. It just made it too easy for you.
yeah. Well, it
And
was
so
only
they needed
effective
to fix
really
that
like
part.
a lot of the bosses and stuff were good at dodging it. What made it
Oh, were they?
effective is if you were playing with your mimic or another
Yeah.
player because they could draw the aggro, and while
Yep.
it's busy
It's
focusing on
stuck.
that, then you
Yeah.
could just get right up behind it and just full blast
Yeah.
right in the back, and it would just
And
eviscerate
really,
stuff.
you can do the same thing with a sorcery build. You just
Yeah.
get a sorcerer, do that fucking
Yeah, I have that spell, the
whatever
Comet
that spell
Azure
is.
spell. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the Comet Azure, you can actually hold it. If you hold
Yeah, you can do
R1,
as
it just
much
keeps
as you
going
want.
till your mana's out.
Yeah. So you can do
Um,
that kind of a thing.
mhm.
I don't know if it knocks them over like it does with the other sword,
I
but
don't it didn't seem like it did because I have the spell and I tried using it a couple times and it
mhm.
does a lot of damage as long as they stay in the blast, but it wasn't like staggering them and knocking them over. So I think
Yeah.
that's the key difference is the sword does, that doesn't. Like
Yeah. Those little like differences, like if you have a sword, like almost all the Ashes of War are uh they give you a bunch of poise, so while you're doing them you can't be staggered unless you get hit a ton.
mhm.
And that is what allows you to use them, because if you got staggered the second you got hit, you wouldn't be able to use any of them.
Well, so that was
And
the thing with the Night in Flames. I got staggered every time. If I was like trying to charge up and use the blast
well,
and the enemy ran at me and
yeah,
hit me, it would
that's also
cancel it out.
because it wasn't a single button Ash of War. It was a stance. So you
Mhm,
have to hold the L and then you do R1 or L1 or whatever, right?
mhm.
Or R2 or whatever.
Well, it's L2
Um,
and R1, yeah. Mhm.
L2,
You hold L2 to go
R1.
into stance, and then R1 to use the blast while you're in the
Right, but
stance.
then you have to do another button to do the other one, right?
R2,
You
yeah, for
R2,
the
right? So it's
flame sweep.
R's.
Mhm.
I don't do the stance stuff a lot, um but because of that, it doesn't have the poise, because the poise comes from the one button L2 that just goes into it and it goes.
Mhm.
But because that's a stance, you can hold the stance and then be staggered while you're holding the stance. So that's like probably what they were thinking, is that that'll balance it out. The problem is, on bosses don't run up to you the second you do something they know you're about to
Mhm.
do.
Yeah.
Whereas in PvP they do. In PvP they see what's going to happen and then they respond much more rapidly. That's why PvP is just a totally different
I just
game.
don't even mess with PvP because people, it's like a game all in itself. You
It
have to kind of
is. It's
research like
totally
what are the
different.
most effective builds right now, and then build your character that way.
Yeah.
And
What I like
I've
about
never been
PvP is
interested
that
in it.
it's level dependent. So like the person has to be relatively within the same level as the person they're invading. So you can't have like a level 150 invade a level 80. It won't happen.
That would they just wipe the floor
So
with them
so
anyway.
that's why people have PvP builds that are stuck at certain levels. So they have like a 60 PvP, an 80 PvP, and 150 PvP, and that way they can go invade into different worlds. But that limits their ability to just wreck. But it means you have to know the build and know the strategy um, to kill, because when you're PvPing, you're also against usually 3 people. So
Mhm.
that's my problem with PvP really, is that the invader just runs off because they want you to have to fight some of the NPCs in the game. There's some of the
The enemies, yeah, they want to
enemies,
create an
and that's
advantage.
their only advantage. That just creates this protracted, like really long engagement that like now I have to go find my souls way off into the level. I like dueling. If I'm going to do it, I want a duel. I just want one-on-one duels, and I just want the invader to come in and fight people one at a time. And I think that's more interesting. It's like, okay, you came here to fight, let's fight. But if you get ganked because you have, it's 3-on-1, it's just not fair. So they have to do that run off thing. So when I get invaded, typically, well, if I'm with friends, I can't control anything. They just go fucking fight. But if I'm by myself, or if I'm like happen to just meet up, I like to just meet up at the bonfire and just fight. Like I don't care if I die. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
when I did do a few
Fine.
invasions for one of the side quests, and one of the people I invaded, they were the 3 people, like the host and his 2 people he had summoned in. They were just sitting on the ground, and I just ran up to them, and then one of them did the bow. I did the bow, and then we just did like a duel. It was
Yeah.
just the 2 of us, and then I beat him, and then the next guy ended up wiping the floor with me because
Yeah.
I wasn't that skilled. But it was kind of cool because like I've seen it in other Souls games where it's like once you both bow, it's kind of like, okay, let's do this.
It can be.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Um,
I think that that's the different stuff you can do in co-op,
mhm.
is you can try to trick the invader, or the invader can try to trick you. But because like I'm trying to find things in the game, I'm not trying to like just get good at PvP. If you just want to get good at PvP, just do that a lot, because that's the
Yeah.
only way to get good at it. But you're interrupting my game. And so I want it to be over quickly. So I just want to do a duel. I
That's
just
how
want you
I
to
feel. I'm
either
like, can
you
you
kill
just
me or
kill
I'm going to
me?
kill
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
and then I'll go about my day. Um,
Do you get invaded? I never, the only time I've ever been invaded is if when I was summoning like you and Joey into my game. That's the only time I would never get invaded
I don't think
otherwise.
I've been invaded alone. I'm kind of thinking of
Yeah.
invasions in
Just,
general
yeah.
in all the games, because you get
Because I think
invaded
it
more
targets
in
you
Dark
when
Souls
you
3.
have people in your game. It's like then you're
It
at the top of
it
the list for
yeah, you're
invasion.
almost not going to be invaded alone, but you will definitely be invaded if you have 3, like
Yeah.
at some point. But there have been times when there's 3 of us, and um I'm just like, hey, don't go anywhere. Don't follow them.
Hmm.
Because if we follow, this is going to take 20, 30, 40. It could take an hour to go fucking deal with this guy, because you have to fight all
Hmm.
the regular enemies, and you're just sort of like running through the level in whatever direction he wants you to run in. And I just find that to be not fun. I'd rather just like when we're playing together, I want to go through the level. I want to like
Yeah, that's how it is for
go
me. It's like
find all the
I'm
stuff in the level.
doing this for the co-op experience of helping
Yeah.
somebody get through an area or fight a
Yeah.
boss or whatever. But anyway,
Yeah.
I recommend the Dark Moon Greatsword is my
Yeah.
be all end all. If you're into the strength intelligence build, it's a fantastic sword, and
Yeah.
it doesn't feel cheap. Like it's just a great sword. Um,
Yeah,
'Cause when
I've been watching some videos on faith builds, and there's a couple of faith swords that have really cool um uh uh special moves. One that does this um uh like fire lightning on the ground that just waves away from you, and it just kills like everything on the
Oh, is
ground.
that the? I think that's the sword that you get when you turn in the remembrance for the final boss. I don't remember
Oh,
what the
really?
sword's
You
called.
don't get it
Yeah,
until that? Well, fuck
yeah,
me.
because I can get it right now. I just didn't have the 20,000 runes on me to because it's like the remembrance plus 20,000 runes to get it.
Yeah.
But it also requires I have to up my dexterity and my something else. So there's like two stats I was
Maybe
short
faith,
on to even be able to use it. So
because it
I
does
think it was
holy
faith because I
damage. Yeah.
I only have like 18 in faith now.
Yeah.
I went from having like 50 in faith to 18
Yeah.
with my respec because I was like, well, I don't even
I think the
use faith
game
that anymore now.
I think that particular weapon might be the only one that uses intelligence and faith, because it's just never a build anybody does.
No, yeah, it was
And
a
that's
build
why I
I
didn't
wasn't
really
going
want
to
to do
use.
it.
Yeah. I wasn't going
Um,
to use it, but the sword scales with
I
when you get
know.
to plus 10, it's a B rating on faith and
Yeah.
intelligence. So I was like, well, I guess that's my build is faith, intelligence,
Yeah.
and then a little bit of strength and some, of some vigor and stuff to balance my other stats
Yeah.
out. But pretty much the only stat I didn't mess with at all was arcane.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it's really only for the different dragons
It's for the
incantations that you
dragon
get.
ones and for bleed. It helps your
Mhm.
bleed. And I think it helps your frenzy if you do frenzy. But I think frenzy is
Yeah.
mostly faith.
But I guess in the last patch they said that they actually buffed arcane to like make it more useful because no, like I
Yeah,
don't think
and
anybody
they
was
they
really using
helped
it.
with the weapon scaling, because there were some weapons that are arcane requirements, but
Hmm.
they didn't scale, and so nobody used them. But they added the scaling to them, so they
Yeah.
were more like a normal weapon. So we're at about an hour and 11. I need to use the bathroom. Do you want
Oh,
to?
okay.
Do you mind if I do that and then we keep going, or do you want to try to end it out? End it out.
Wherever you feel like. I mean, I guess we could probably just wrap it up unless you wanted to do like a topic. I
No,
think we haven't
I
been
think
talking
we've
about.
already gone long enough. So I think, I mean, I'd be down to keep talking, but I need to go to the bathroom. So if
Oh,
we want
okay.
to just finish it up here for the podcast portion of our conversation, um,
Yeah, we
then
can wrap it
I
up.
can
That's fine.
I can use a bathroom. Do you have a specific recommendation?
Yeah, I just finished the book. I read it before a few years ago, but then I just reread it again. It's a really short novel, so that's kind of why I picked it up. Because I just felt like something that I could kind of read in a couple of days. It's by Cormac McCarthy. It's called Child of God, which I think there's a Netflix film that's based off the book, which is actually a solid, pretty faithful adaptation. But it's a very interesting book about. It takes place like in the Appalachian Mountains, and it follows this man named Lester Ballard, who's kind of like a dim-witted, hillbilly type of character. But it's kind of like a chronicle of his descent into depravity. Like he starts off as just kind of a sort of a loathsome person, but then throughout the course of the story, he gets involved in necrophilia and murder,
Oh my
and
goodness.
yeah, it's a dark book.
Sounds like a
It's
Cormac McCarthy fucking book.
yeah, but it's really good. It's just and it's short too. It it's something you can literally bust out like in an afternoon. It's like only a hundred and something pages. But I just finished it the other day, and I was like, oh, I should use this as the recommendation. Book's been around for a little while, but it's a
Nice.
really good kind of like portrayal of like a serial killer kind of thing.
Hmm.
But there's a book that the first time I read it surprised me because it's kind of like a typical dark Southern Gothic McCarthy novel, and then like suddenly some things start happening. Like, wait, did he just do that? Like, what the fuck?
Oh, really?
That kind of came out of nowhere. It felt like. So yeah, it's really good if people are looking for like a brisk read that they can finish up in like maybe a couple days or a week, depending on how much time you have to read, and you're interested in like a kind of a dark Southern Gothic novel. It's a good one. I enjoy it.
Nice. I will.
Or watch the Netflix movie. It's I think James Franco
Oh,
directed
really?
it, but the movie does I haven't watched it in a while, but remember the movie did like a really solid. I think it actually pretty much. I don't think they really cut anything that I can remember. Which is it's an easy book to adapt because it's not that long, so it's like it's perfect for like a 90 to 120 minute film. So if people don't like reading, then watch the movie.
Yeah, I had no idea. I didn't know that was available. I'll have to check that out.
And I think you'd like it. I think you'd enjoy it, at least like a one time through just to
Yeah.
see. But I don't think it would end up on like your your top hits that you revisit a lot.
Yeah, it looks a little fucking dark. Nice. My recommendation is Heretics of Dune. I just finished it.
Ooh.
I don't recommend reading it out of order, so don't just go read it. It would make no fucking sense at all. But read all the Dune books and then read Heretics of Dune. I just wrote a review. It's at joesnotesblog.com. If you want to read my review on it before you actually check it out, so go to the website for that. I had a very hard time getting into it. I got through about half the book before I understood anything was going on. It was really, really hard. I was very close to giving up on it, but once I passed a particular point, everything started to click and make sense, and it all started to reference the previous books in a way that I like could grasp onto and understand.
Mhm.
And all the new characters flesh themselves out to the point where I was like, oh, I like these characters a lot. I really got into it. Like gets more action packed as the thing goes on, and
Mhm.
as the action happens, the characters start to reveal like how powerful they are and how interesting they are and how manipulative they are. And that's what got me to like be super into it.
To the
And by
finish
the end of it,
line.
i
Yeah.
was i was back on the Dune train.
Was this the
And
first one that takes place like 1,000 years later? So
it's not the first one that
oh,
does
okay.
that, but it's the first one that does that and gets rid of the old characters.
That's what I mean. Because I was like, it's tough when you're reading a series and then suddenly it's a fresh cast, and you're like,
Yeah,
oh, but all the characters that I've grown to love are now
yeah,
gone, and I'm stuck with these fuckers. Like, well, come on.
yeah. There's one character that's left in it from the previous one, but he's not the same. He's a clone,
Hmm.
because there's these clones. But so he has some similarities. But what's cool is there's genetic lineages, and so you're essentially just learning about the genetic ancestors of the ones you care about. So it's kind of like them. It's kind of just a continuation of who they are, because genetics means so much in the books. Um, and yeah, it takes 1500. It takes place 1500 years after the God Emperor of Dune book, and God Emperor of Dune book takes place like 3000 years after the previous book. But the God Emperor is still alive. He lived for 3000 years, and then dies. Spoiler alert for fucking that book. But it's like
After 3,000 years, I think it's safe to rest
yeah, and he
eternally.
had to, and it just like, how do you can't have him live forever, else he's just in he was a tyrant. He
Hmm.
took over everything, the entire universe. So because he could literally see the future of everyone's actions, so you couldn't do
Oh shit.
much about him. So he was very powerful. um but after he dies, like everything is like up for grabs, and so you have this massive like power struggle in the universe of like who's going to be in charge. And then yeah, a lot of stuff happens, so I recommend it. And so if you want to read my review of it, it's on the website.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I think that's going to do it for this episode. We talked about the Batman again. We talked about Elden Ring again. So if you don't like those topics,
Stay tuned for the next episode
yeah,
where
stick around.
we promise not to talk about this
Yeah,
stuff.
we'll just make it a concerted effort to not be so mono uh, topic wise.
They're both
Um,
cultural milestones, so I'm okay with talking about it again.
we're
They're a
a
huge deal. What other
cultural
game or movies
podcast.
are going to come out this year that we're going to kind of gush about that much? Probably, I
Not
can't
a
really
lot.
think of anything. So,
Um, but if you enjoyed those, hit us up and let us know what you thought about the movie and the games, or any other things that you're into. And if you have any questions, email us at fleetingthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. And we will see you next time.
toodaloo.